All right, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. This is going to be really, really, really cool. I'm very, very excited for this conversation. Today, we have with us Mr. Kris Decker. He's the main writer, editor of a really cool website called Low Tech Magazine. That's also been produced into some books, and I'm sure we'll get into that and talk about that. I've followed this site for I don't know how 10 years or something, a long time. And every time an article comes out, I'm like so excited to read it. It's so well researched. There's loads of footnotes. It's really, really insightful. And so I've been very excited to talk to you, Kris. So just to kind of start us out and give us a jumping off point, let's talk about one of the things that you've put together most recently, which is kind of a practical how-to guide and an explainer for setting up small solar power systems and different configurations of solar panels and batteries or not batteries, and kind of how to set it up with some really nice drawings and sketches that explains all the components and stuff like that. And I saw that. I thought that was really cool. And I realized I've helped friends maintain their off-grid solar projects and stuff before, but I hadn't really had much experience piecing together my own little solar system. And so I thought, man, this is really cool. It seems like really straightforward. I'm sure I can figure it out. And so, and we have a small farm here. We have an old shack that we converted into a barn, and it doesn't have any lights in it or anything like that. And we're about to go into the season where our sheep are having babies and stuff. And I was like, man, it'd be really nice to have lights in the barn this time of year, just to check on the sheep at night. Uh-huh. And so just using your website and your guide, I cobbled together a little solar powered light system. So now we have lights in our barn, and it was easy. And I really appreciate you putting that together. When you put together these kind of how-to explainers, I think it's really, really valuable. I hope people are telling you how valuable it is, because a lot of times for someone to do something, you just need a little bit of confidence that you can do it, that you can figure it out if you haven't done it before. And that's something that somebody with like little or no experience can look at and say, okay, I basically get the idea now how to piece together these components of a system. So anyway, thank you very much for doing that. Maybe we can start there. You can describe that a little bit and the different modules that you've put together. And and then we'll just go from there.
Okay, well, thank you for a very nice introduction. I started kind of experimenting with solar power in 2016, around that time, because I like to practice what I preach, and I like to use the technologies that I write about. And the thing with solar power is that the kind of conventional solar system that you hear everyone talking about actually requires you first to be like to own the building, to have, if you rent a place, it's not gonna work, and also that you're living in a single family dwelling because you need the roof. And of course, in an apartment building, when you have from the moment you have like say more than 3 or 4 floors, then the roof is not gonna do it. And also, what if you're renting and you're not sure you want to stay? Also, it requires a lot of financial investment, the kind of conventional solar installation. So I was specifically trying out to find out if it's possible to actually have a low-tech approach to that, so that people who rent a place, who live in apartment buildings, and who don't have much budget can also start with solar and go pretty far, actually, as I demonstrated. So I'm still connected to the power grid, basically for legal requirements. So what I can, what I did is I put a lot of solar panels on my balcony and on my windowsills, and that kind of provides me with enough power to do most of the stuff in my house, except the cooking, which is electric, and then say the washing machine, stuff like that, and the fridge. These are, of course, big energy users, and the cooking fire, I could solve it with say a fire on the on the balcony like a wood stove, but that's simply not allowed. So I cannot really go all the way. But I did lower a lot my electricity consumption, and more importantly than that, I became very much aware of how renewable, the possibilities and the limits of renewable energy. And one of those limits is obviously when at night there is no energy, and then if it's cloudy, it's also very little power production. And then you can find all kinds of ways to deal with that. And as you say in the manual, I kind of compilated all this experience that I gathered over the last years. So from the systems that I built in my house, and then also the system I built for the website, which is solar powered. And one of the things that struck me as very interesting is that, well, what becomes pretty clear from the moment you have your own solar systems is that the batteries are the problematic part. So that's in terms of financial investment, like the battery. When you buy everything at the start, it doesn't really show because the price of the battery is more or less the price of the solar panels. But then the battery after 5 years needs to be replaced, and the solar panels last for 30 years or even longer. We don't even really know. So when you start calculating how much money you spend over the life of the whole system, then it becomes pretty clear that the battery and the charge controller, that's where the big costs are. So for one of the last articles, I did the calculation, and it's about 80-90% of the total costs of a solar system. And that's not just financial, but also energetic. So the energy you have to invest in a solar system goes mostly to the energy storage. And then there's ways to kind of lower that footprint by, say, rather than trying to use renewable energy to kind of hold on to this idea that you always need to have access to all the energy that you possibly may need. You could also do it differently, like it happened in the early days, like before the Industrial Revolution, basically, that you adjust your energy demand to the energy supply, which is based on the weather, because that's wind power, solar power, whether you like it or not, they depend on the weather, while fossil fuels are a dispatchable energy source. You burn them whenever you want. And that's how we got to an economy and a lifestyle where we take it for granted that there's energy for 24 hours a day and 365 days a year. And so when I investigated like the history of renewable technology, energy, I found out that that was how people did it. Like the Netherlands, where they had all these thousands of mechanical windmills that were doing all these industrial processes. It was basically a huge factory powered by wind, but there were no batteries. It just, the whole thing, it operated when it was windy, and when the wind was gone, then, well, they just stopped working and they did other stuff, and then they came back when the weather got better again. And that inspired me a lot in all the stuff I built afterwards, in the sense that you can really save a lot of money and a lot of energy if you limit the energy storage, and if you accept some days per year, and that's obviously in winter time, that you don't have enough energy. So there's now, like a few days ago, I was in the dark, and you can consider that a failure of my system, but I'm like, well, I still have always enough energy to make a little bit of light, so I can still read for hours if I want, until the morning if I want. So what's actually the big deal? I mean, that's those days that are maybe 20, 30 days a year. I cannot do whatever I would be able. I don't know. I cannot do something that requires I don't know, like printing, for example. If I want to print a version of my article, I need to do that when the sun shines. And that kind of becomes a way to plan my work around the weather. Like, okay, tomorrow is sunny, I'm gonna print, and then I'm gonna sit there and I'm gonna work on that on paper, and then I don't need energy. So that I found very interesting, that when you build systems with limited energy storage, you quickly find ways to work around that and actually go off the grid, or partly in my case for legal reasons, but with very little money, very little investment, very little energy invested also. And then I came across the Living Energy Farm, which is like a community in, I think, Virginia. It is in the US. And they really took that to the extreme, in the sense that they have a whole like a communal co-housing project with a whole farm and a workspace, like a metal workshop. And it all runs on solar power, but with hardly any batteries. So they have some batteries for the lighting in the household, but like, for instance, the whole workshop, which is quite extensive, like it's not just a hobby shop, it's like they built ovens there. And it only operates when the sun shines. So it's solar panels going straight to the tools with some voltage converters in between. And they basically work in the same way as the medieval workers did in the Netherlands. So when the weather is optimal, they operate their workshop, and if not, they do something else. And
So
I think if we...
Kris, we just we actually just interviewed Alexis from Living Energy Farms.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yes,
that's
and I believe that episode was just published today. So
really okay.
yeah,
Cool.
your episodes are probably going to be kind of paired up. So we didn't intend this, but we're a little bit on a theme right now. So I think we should definitely keep talking about the solar stuff that you've worked on, but we can kind of expand out more from there into more, low tech investigations.
Yep.
But I definitely have a couple questions to go, but I want to see if Simon wants to jump in here.
Yeah, sure. I wanted to ask you about the way that you marry like the high tech of the web with like your low tech interests. I think first, one of the most interesting thing is most of the people that I know that are into your work are also like high tech workers, which I find fascinating. I think there's lots of inspiration in there for people, and really, it's good for us to think about, potentially the waste, or like how we are not in sync, or rather out of sync with the systems that power everything. But I'm just wondering, like, how did you come into this? Like, what fires you up about low tech, and what got you interested in it in the first place?
How it all started? Well, I was actually, let's say, a high-tech journalist for 10 years before I started Low Tech magazine. With a high-tech journalist, I mean, I was the typical freelance science and tech journalist for newspapers and magazines in Belgium. In my case, I was still living in Belgium. And so they send me to all these, every week I had to go somewhere. Some guy usually invented something or solved some world problem with technology. And I had to write about that. And after 10 years, I was like, okay, but every time you ask some critical questions to these people, then it basically all falls apart, these techno solutions. Like, the one that really got me thinking very hard was the one on alga fuel. Like, I went to interview this guy who made alga fuel for airplanes. And then if you ask them, well, how much energy you actually put into the process, and it's like, yeah, well, it's actually more than comes out. But then what's the point, man? And yeah, this whole hype has been, I mean, it's gone. Nobody talks about that anymore. And so if you kind of work in this report about these technological solutions, after a while you start noticing that there's like a hype, and then everybody talks about it, and it goes away because it doesn't work, and then there's a new hype the day after, and it keeps going like that. So I was like getting really critical about us always thinking that there is a technological solution to a problem. Often it's actually a solution looking for a problem, like with artificial intelligence. Like, yeah, why do we need that? I don't know. I'm still not, nobody tells me this, but it's like we have it, so we need to kind of use it for for something. So it's really literally a solution looking for a problem that doesn't really exist. And that combined with the fact that as a freelance journalist, at least in Belgium and at least in that period, it was not the most attractive position. So I was working very hard and earning very little. And so when I moved to Spain in 2007, all these things kind of came together, and I just woke up in the middle of one night and said, I'm going to start my own magazine, and I'm going to just turn it on its head. And rather than only talking about the newest technology that will save us, I'm going to look to the past and actually prove the opposite. Like, if you want solutions, don't count on new technologies. Just look at the past for inspiration, and you will always find it there. And at the same time, it's not about going back to the past, which is, of course, also impossible, but more like learning from it. And that's why I also I'm not against high technologies. Like, my website is obviously not a pre-industrial technology, but I kind of treat it like as if it is a sailboat or a windmill. That's how it operates. The concept behind it is like, you have a modern technology, a website, but it's just as dependent on the weather as a sailboat or a windmill. And so it's playing with these kind of high-tech, low-tech combinations that I think it's very interesting and much more attractive than just telling people like, hey, let's go back to living as if we did in the Middle Ages.
So talk a little bit more about, so you've migrated your website. It used to be just a normal website hosted in the sort of usual way, and then you've migrated it over, and now it's completely hosted in a sort of independent way and all solar powered. Or maybe describe how that works. And
yeah, so indeed, for many years I had like the typical website hosted somewhere. It was not WordPress but Typepad, but it's pretty similar. And at the same time, I was not really, I mean, it was not a fantastic website, but it worked. I could do it myself. But I didn't really realize that it had a huge footprint. Even me, like writing about energy use of the internet and so on, I had actually never really made the link, like, but how sustainable is my website? And so in 2018, I got this offer from two design students from RISD in New York to make a new web design, because they thought it was very ugly, and I agree. It was a very ugly website. I'm definitely not a designer. And so they came to Europe, and yeah, in the beginning it was a bit like, okay, we're gonna make you a better looking website. But pretty soon from that came the idea, like, but why don't we go further and try to make a website that's actually in line with the philosophy of the magazine? Could we build a sustainable website? What would it look like? What would it be? Is it even possible? Because there's people saying like, if the energy crisis comes, then the internet is the first to disappear and stuff like that. But I was thinking like, well, maybe, but maybe not. And to my surprise, we found the inspiration, as always, in the past. So we just looked back to the early days of the internet. Well, what actually happened, one of them came at the day when showed me a website, like, look, we made this, and I was immediately in love with the design. And I asked, where did you get it from? And she said, I just copied the first website ever made. I took the design of the first website ever made, which is still online, from this Swiss laboratory. And she started building on that and kind of following all the design principles of this first website ever made. And so we obviously made some changes, like the internet in those days was purely a text medium. There were not even images, let alone videos. So that was a bit too radical. So rather than that, we found inspiration also in a compression technique from the 90s, dithering, that was used for video games. So that we then used for the images, and we basically made the most lightweight website that you can imagine. And why did we wanted to make it so light? Because I had this idea of like, I want to run it on solar power, and that's if you want to do that, then if you would do it with a normal website, you would need a huge solar installation and batteries, and for which I don't have the space. So the challenge was to make such a tiny website that it could run on a solar panel that fits on my balcony without taking all the space of the balcony. And that's what it became. And now, like 5 years later, we kind of already completely rebuilt it because it became too big for the original software we used. And it's been running for 5 years, actually, as smoothly as you can imagine. I mean, I had many websites, but never a website that was so easy to maintain. It's a static website. You cannot hack it. Not much can go wrong. It's just when the sun goes down. So it has a battery mostly because of readers in the US. Otherwise, you would all have to get up very early to read Low Tech magazine. So it has a very small battery that gets it through the night. But when the weather gets bad, then it goes down, and it's just like the windmill or the sailboat. It stops working, and you're gonna have to do something else. You're gonna have to come back another day. And it's about like 20 days a year that it's offline, mostly now in winter again.
So this is really interesting. I think, and I think it was maybe one of your articles, basically on the footprint or the energy demands of the internet and the trends. So maybe elaborate this a little bit more, because so what you've done is you've kind of gone back to an earlier version of the internet when the processing speeds were much lower. We didn't have streaming videos and all this kind of stuff all the time. And of course, you think about the internet, it's easy to think, oh, everything's in the cloud. It's kind of this weightless thing. But in reality, the energy and environmental footprint of internet and all the associated technologies is absolutely enormous and growing, because what do we want to do? We want to be able to watch Netflix on our phone. We want to stream video and watch YouTube and do all this, watch this podcast and that sort of thing. So talk about how the development of all of these features, and the rapid pace of the development of all these features that we enjoy from the internet is expanding the footprint and the energy intensity. I try to elaborate that point, because I think it's something that maybe we don't think about that much.
So it's ever since the internet came, it has been kind of promoted as a sustainable alternative to physical activities and services. And so because of that, like for example, you download music instead of buying a CD, and then the idea is you drive to the music shop and you buy a CD, and then you come back, and it takes energy, and the internet is in the clouds, as you say. It's just floating around there. It's not using anything. But of course, that's a myth, because the internet is just like anything else. It's a massive infrastructure that is real, that consists of metal and copper and plastics and a lot of fossil fuels. And so that's the first thing. By now, people kind of get that the internet is not an immaterial thing, but that doesn't really stop the energy use from it. Keeps growing, and it keeps growing really quickly, and that has to do with mainly three trends that we all, in the design of the website we made, we kind of go against these trends. So the first is that the content on the internet is increasingly heavier or fatter, or whatever kind of metaphor you use, but you can measure it very precisely in, like, the average download of a website is now 3-4 times what it was 10 years ago. So it's just a lot more of zeros and ones that you have to download to see the content. And that actually has to do with the fact, also what you refer to, that in the early 90s, we had very slow internet connections. We had not that very powerful computers. And so every website was a sustainable, lightweight website, because it was the only way to allow people to access them. What happened, of course, is that since then, computers got ever more powerful, and internet connections got faster, and the website designers evolved with that, and they started building heavier and heavier websites. They started including images and videos and a lot of kind of coding crap that should not be there. And not just that, like also these videos and images have increasingly higher resolutions. It's a trend that keeps going, and that has become pretty much absurd. If you now, like some days ago, I received a photo from a professional photographer, and I wanted it to upload it. It's like 20 megabytes is now like what comes out of a digital camera. And then people upload that onto the internet. While when you are going to watch it on a phone, you have like the image quality of a cinema screen that for watching it on your phone. So it's completely ridiculous. But there's nothing into the infrastructure built in, like even in WordPress. Like WordPress could say like, hey man, what are you doing? Like, what are you thinking? You're uploading a 20 megabyte image. So that's one thing, that this kind of what you also see in other technologies like cars. If you compare the car of today with the car of 20 or 30 years ago, like, yeah, that's like it's twice as or 3 times as heavy and powerful. And the second trend is the fact that we are increasingly online in terms of time. So in the 90s, what we did when we went on the internet is like you go to the library or to the office or maybe at your desktop computer at home. The internet was really like a place. It was at a certain spot in your house or in your city. And then you dialed into the internet through a very slow connection that you had to pay by the minute on top of that. And so the way we used the internet was very different. I still remember I was already a journalist then, that you write all these things on a paper that you need. You go to the internet, you have 2 hours, you pay for it in the internet shop, and you download everything you can. Then you spend at home, you spend going through this information, and you do another round of research. That's how it worked. So the offline was a kind of a part of the time you were online, and then the rest of the time you were offline. Obviously, things have changed. We now have internet connections that are not just everywhere. Like we have wireless internet, we have wireless computers. We don't longer pay by the minute, and the result is that we're basically online the whole time, most of people. And that, of course, combined with the other trend, like ever heavier content and more time online, means way more energy use, way more data traffic. And then the third trend is capitalism, basically. It's all this data traffic that has nothing to do with content, but about making money from that content, like advertisements, trackers, cookies, all this spying that is going on, and data profiling. Which is huge also. It's a lot of traffic. I mean, if I look at my visitor stats for the website, like there's so much going on that is like it's not people visiting, it's robots visiting. So those 3 trends we turned around. So rather than a heavier website, we built a lightweight website. Rather than being always online, it depends. Sometimes you can't reach it. And also, we made it completely anonymous in the sense that there's no trackers, no cookies, nothing. And that results in a website that you can run on a computer the size of a mobile phone, even if with high traffic and everything.
Nice. I wanted to ask about some of the projects that you've covered and things that you've worked on. Do any of these see regular use?
Excuse me? Sorry, I didn't get that.
Like regarding the projects that you've worked on, or that you've covered at least, do you think any of these have potential for like regular use? And would you recommend any of them?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like taking the website as an example, I think that yes, it could be quite general approach to, but I think more important than the fact that it's solar powered is the fact that it's lightweight. So it's what it's not just about websites, but I think there's way too much focus on the supply side. Like there's a lot of discussion about energy sources, and there's like different kind of camps of people. Like you have those who believe in wind and solar energy. Then you have those who believe in nuclear energy. Then you have the ones who want to stick with fossil fuels. And for me, frankly, I don't really care. What I care about is that we reduce energy demand, because in the end, all these other types of energy sources cannot exist without fossil fuels. You always come back there, and you cannot build a wind turbine without fossil fuels. You cannot build a solar panel without fossil fuels. So they're kind of always presented as alternatives to fossil fuels, but that's not what they are. They are, if used well, they can be way more sustainable. Than it's a better way to use fossil fuels. Like here in Spain, for example, if you put a solar panel, yes, that's definitely better than fossil fuels. Do it in Sweden or the Netherlands, that's already a more difficult situation. But there you have wind. So, but of course, the thing is that yes, it could potentially be more like normal way of doing things. Only that I'm killing the economy. So many of the things that I write about or that I propose, if everybody would do them, would actually do it, then what about capitalism? What about economic growth? What about this whole system of people having a lot of money in the banks and they need to invest their capital somewhere? So it's, in that sense, it's realistic, but not without completely attacking everything else.
So you mentioned something about when you're talking about the different streams of traffic that are traveling back and forth over the internet, and you mentioned robots and also like the surveillance stuff, and that component where, in a sense, like we're being mined by other actors to figure out what do we look at online and what are our consumption patterns and what can they figure out about us. And a lot of that gets put into AI algorithms, and it can be used for control, it could be used for propaganda, and all kinds of stuff like that.
Also,
So you've done at least one or two or a few articles imagining what like a low-tech internet could look like. So I want you to describe that a little bit. I mean, we've had some discussions on this podcast about if a topic that comes up, for example, some in the US nowadays is about being able to be anonymous online or be able to avoid surveillance and that sort of thing. And so like, what's the potential of the low-tech internet, the components that you've imagined, how it can work, both from a perspective of being lighter weight on the planet, but also could this advance freedom? Could it advance more like anonymity or privacy or things like that on the web? And what would the components of a low-tech internet look like, and how would it operate?
Yeah, so I think one answer to that question is actually an event I'm just setting up now here for in a few weeks in Barcelona. Is that the alternative, because it's all about social media these days, and that's everything you say applies to them very well. Like that's where the kind of privacy problem and addiction also. And so, but if you think about it, like, because I started Low Tech magazine before the era of social media, and then social media came and it kind of changed everything. But before that, it was a much nicer internet, and it was basically the blogosphere. And rather that you had a profile page on a social media platform, you had your own blog, and in the side column you had a blog roll, which were the blogs from your friends and the people you followed and admired and so on.
Right.
And if you think about it, if everybody would go back to that, like rather than building your profile page on a social media platform, you built a blog like people did in the 90s, and you link to all your friends, and then you have your reading list in your blog roll, because every morning you can go there, see what your friends are doing or your idols, and then you publish something yourself. They come to watch it. You can link to others in your blog post, and that is actually more or less the same as what social media does, but just without the whole platform in between and with nobody watching, basically. just you and the people who are involved. And
Right.
it would give the same kind of, it would give the same advantages without all the disadvantages that come with it. Also the addiction that goes with it, because there's not an algorithm that tries to keep you there as long as possible and sends you to, always every time I have to go to YouTube, I end up watching the most dangerous roads in the world, or horrible plane crashes, and I'm like, how did I get there? It's not anything I would look up because I want to. It's just that the algorithm sends me there. And I think we should get rid of those things. And that's one answer, I think. In infrastructural, you could build it. You could easily make the internet so lightweight that nobody talks about its energy use anymore. But for that, I think the biggest problem has become video. I think it was a mistake to move the whole television to the internet, because that's what created an energy use problem. Because if you compare the data traffic that a video causes compared to an image, and if you then compare the image to text, and if we would go straight back to only text, then the internet would be extremely energy efficient. And I think images are, like we showed on the solar power website, you can compress them really, really well. But with videos, it's way more complicated. So how do you make a sustainable video? Well, keep it short. But in terms of compression, there are possibilities. But it also kind of, porn is also a big part of that market, and I don't think people are waiting for dithered porn images, because
So what you described about the blog model, when you were describing that, and I had a blog back in the day. It's still up somewhere. On Blogspot, if you remember Blogspot from Google.
Yes.
But it kind of occurred to me that what you're describing sounds a little bit like Substack. Now, of course, Substack has features like you can add videos and all that kind of stuff, so it's not made to be lightweight. But the idea, are you familiar with Substack?
Yes, but I'm not using it, but I checked it out. Yes.
Do you think? Okay, so to what extent do you think Substack kind of matches up to what you were describing as, like, not social media, but a place where you go and you blog and you have lists of other Substacks that you read and people respond to each other's writing? Do you think it conforms to that, or has it veered off course?
Yeah, it goes in the right direction. It's just that, of course, that's a good first step. So I definitely like it way more than any social media. But of course, I don't really know who owns Substack, or what's going on behind the scenes, or what is being controlled or analyzed in terms of data traffic. But there's, of course, now also this kind of trend that people also kind of try to engage people into hosting their own websites.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of, that's of course the ideal. There's nobody who can cut off my website. To do that, you have to break into my house and destroy the solar panel. While, especially in recent years, if you say something that is not according to what you should say, then your website or your profile may be gone.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people were.
You don't own it like you would a blog traditionally. Yeah.
And so also another thing, what happened, even if you don't say controversial things, because when I had my blog, basically, how do you tie people to your, to make sure they come back? You have a newsletter, like an email newsletter. And it's the best decision I ever made. So I started one in 2007. I'm still maintaining it. And it's also the only thing I still have, because what happened when social media came, like first it was StumbleUpon, before it was Facebook, and then Twitter and everything. So in all of these platforms, what I did was, as any other publisher, you build a following. And then what happens is that in the case of StumbleUpon, by the time I had 10,000 followers, StumbleUpon disappeared. And so you lose your 10,000 followers. Then I went to Facebook, and by the time I had 15,000 followers, Facebook told me, look, if you want to reach your followers, you're going to have to pay for them. And I was like, well, get lost. I'm not gonna do that. And gone were the 15,000 followers. Then Twitter, same, like, okay, I don't know how it's gonna end, but yeah, I have there another 13,000 followers that probably I'm also losing them. So you have all these people who now decide to build their medium and their content on platforms, which is very dangerous, because there comes a time that the platform or changes the rules or disappears, and you lose everything you had built up over 10 15 years. So
Yeah, like you think about people who yeah, if you say something controversial or whatever, and maybe people have spent years and made 500 or 1,000 YouTube videos, you know, really carefully putting stuff together, and if YouTube decides that you got to go, you're just done. I think you're just done. I don't know that there's back. I mean, if you have backup copies of it, I guess on your computer maybe, but you could totally just get wiped out. Yeah. And the way it's been monetized, where, you know, people either getting money from ads or whatever like that, like it seems very risky. Like something could change and maybe all your content's gone, maybe your whole income stream is gone. So it's really risky. So you feel like there are ways, simply just maybe just you know, hosting your own site or your own content on your own server at home would be a way, just as a kind of a firewall against all of a sudden losing all that.
It's definitely, it's the ultimate solution, let's say. It's just, yeah, it's of course a bit more complicated to host your own server. It's if you can learn, but you don't even have to go that far. You can also just host your own blog at a kind of old-fashioned hosting company, and you keep a backup, and if the hosting company goes bust, then you just go take it to another hosting company. But these are really kind of basically neutral organizations. They have nothing. They're not like a social media platform. Mm-hmm. So you don't necessarily have to go all the way to hosting your own website, because what hosting companies are basically is to do that for you. They simply host thousands of websites in the same data center. Mm-hmm. But yeah, for sure, I think that is, I would advise to anyone who has a plan to build a business online, or like a content production, that use your own platform and for everything, like because that makes sure that whatever happens to the platform, then you're not affected by it. I mean, you're affected anyway, but that you don't lose everything.
Right. Simon, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I wanted to ask about like Low Tech Magazine in general. Are you optimistic about the future? Like, is that why you do this? You think that there's like some path for people?
Yeah, that's very difficult question. I get it more often. Then often I scan if there's children in the room or not. But well, I think my work is very optimistic. So, and I think that's also why a lot of people like it. But then at the same time, I also realize the kind of, it's what I said earlier. Like, yeah, it's all great, and you're all happy reading this, but do you realize what it means? It means destroying the system as it is, and the powers that be are not to be underestimated. You know, I read a lot about history, and I'm in the Middle Ages with the peasant protests and the witch hunts, and it's not the first time that people revolt and in the end just get worse. So it's quite a challenge to break the power of the economic system,
right?
Which I even don't know how. I mean, people then ask me how, but then I'm like, yeah, well, what can I say without landing in jail, you know? I mean, there's a book here, How to Blow Up a Pipeline, that kind of summarizes it pretty well. But I remember putting that book on a social media post, and I immediately got in trouble. Yeah, you cannot associate yourself with that. It's gonna hurt your reputation and so on. So it's difficult. But I prefer to look at everything, I mean, optimistically, But if you say like, we're gonna bet, are we gonna make it or not? And I'm like, yeah, no, of course not. We're not gonna get there. But does it? I don't know. I think it's worth to try to do whatever you can, and that's for me how it feels like. For me, it's a bit like, well, if everything goes really wrong, I did my best. I did what I could, and for me, that's important for my conscience. And but it's a big fight ahead, let's say.
So
because of course, what happens is that the economic system and the power, the authorities are like pushing their own solutions, which are very high tech. And I think a week ago there was a report from the Center of Digital Hate that climate denial had changed, and it's no longer denying that climate change happens, but they're now focusing their efforts on showing that high-tech sustainable solutions don't work. And then I think, whoops, that's what I'm saying for many years. So am I now suddenly a climate denier? It can go fast. It can go fast. I mean, what happened during COVID really made me realize that I have to be very careful what I write. And I mean, I'm not going to stop writing and stop. I'm not going to shut my mouth, but you just have to be very smart how you write it. Because one click and you're out. And
yeah,
you can go
along those lines, I wanted to ask if you can think of an example of a piece that you've published that got a bigger reaction, or a really negative reaction, or a surprising reaction, or a really good reaction. Is there something that you've published over the years that where the response to it has surprised you or in some way?
Yeah, with Insight, there's an article from 2008, which is just 1 year after I started, which is called "The Ugly Side of Solar Panels," and it basically explains. At that moment, the idea was like solar panels. It's 100% carbon neutral. It's free energy. It's like, and I was like, wait, I mean, you're forgetting something. You have to build them. And it's a theme that, I mean, the article is pretty crude because it was also what was available at that time, but the response was overwhelming and overwhelming. I mean, I got insulted. People threatened me. People called me a neo-Nazi. And all I said was like, I mean, I'm running my apartment and my website on solar. So I'm obviously not against solar, but just at that point in history in 2008, saying that solar panels may not be as sustainable as they look was heresy. And yeah, the good thing, of course, now these things have become commonplace, but that was something that really surprised me. People asking me to take this article off the internet. Yeah, so I learned, if you read that piece, you also see I'm like I got 15 years later, I became a much better writer, and when I say something that I know is controversial, I know how to kind of sell it better and without hurting people too much. And that's important, and I think it's very important. Actually, I see it often with people that they are kind of very aggressive, attacking the other side, and that's not a way to make other people understand your position. So I became much more open to, I mean, how you say, to compromise and to see what, I mean, part of it is also what has always fascinated me is that the readers of Low Tech magazine don't have a political color. It's a bit of everything. And that I find hopeful, in a sense that we are in an age of polarization where one side of humanity hates the other. But they're both reading Low Tech magazine. So there is something that binds all these unhappy people on both sides of the political spectrum. And so I'm very interested in what that is. I'm trying to figure it out and how we can. I mean, I see followers of me on Twitter that are kind of politically opposites of each other, and if they would meet, they would probably kill each other. And they're both reading and promoting low-tech magazines. It's really weird to see. So the libertarian and the socialist, and like they hate the others, but they're both reading the same stuff. Sorry, I got a bit far now, maybe.
No, this is great, man. This is really great. Simon, I know I'm kind of hogging the conversation.
No.
I have a couple more things, and I'll try to talk less. But so you have another site too, kind of an adjacent project to Low Tech Magazine called No Tech Magazine.
Yeah.
So why don't you explain No Tech Magazine and deflect the inevitable criticism that you're a Luddite and you're completely against technology?
At the same time. No, No Tech. Of course, No Tech Magazine is basically the sister or the brother side of Low Tech Magazine, and the difference is, or should have been, because it kind of got messed up a bit, but that Low Tech Magazine is the content that I make, like the articles I write myself, and then on No Tech Magazine I link to what others write or make movies or whatever that kind of is related to what I'm saying, like people who are saying, because I'm not the only one being critical of technology, so there's a lot of others. So that's basically the difference. And then essentially the child had to have a name, and I think No Tech Magazine is an even better name than Low Tech Magazine, because you can kind of interpret it in different ways. It's not a tech magazine, or it's a no tech magazine, but so it's not really more than that. Actually, the children have to have a name, and now like Low Tech in France, for example, has become like a hype, and I'm actually thinking to change the Low Tech Magazine to the No Tech Magazine, because they don't really all get it very well, and it becomes a kind of lifestyle thing. I mean, not all of them. There's good writing also, but a lot of people jumped on the bandwagon of Low Tech in France because it's trendy, and then they it becomes its own techno solution, in the sense that you if you have a solar cooker and a hot water bottle, then you're cool and you're sustainable. No, it's more than that. There's a whole political thing. It's a political thing. I mean, sustainability is not about lifestyle and showing that you're different from the others. So am I a Luddite? Not at all, because I'm obviously fascinated by technology, always have been, always have loved to build stuff. And it's just that I'm very unhappy with how technology evolves. And I think most people are, because we all know the thing that our laptop from 10 or 15 years ago lasted forever, until it could not keep up with the heavier websites I was talking about earlier. And if you buy a laptop now, you cannot even change your battery anymore, because it's glued inside, and it doesn't last that long. And what it goes for any product and services, everything just falls apart. And so what is happening? And it's not actually a technological problem, it's an economical problem. Why do we now have laptops that break after 3 years? Because the economic growth requires us to buy a new laptop every 3 years, and not work on one from 2011 or 2010, this one. And the one that we are chatting on is from 2012. That's not what capitalism wants, that you keep working with the same computer for 15 years. And I noticed also, when I started Low Tech Magazine in 2007, people indeed called me Luddites, insulted me. That kind of doesn't happen anymore, or very rarely. So I think that the smartphone plays an important role in that. It's such it has taken such a central part in people's life, and people realize that they're addicted. Some months ago, I did a class here in a school in Barcelona. I asked all these teenagers, what's your addiction on the internet, and none of them escapes from that. So I think the smartphone is an important technology in people becoming more critical about technology and taking people like me more seriously, because it's very invasive technology. It has changed everything. But I'm fine with the label of a Luddite, by the way. Their fight was legit. It was they were fighting for something that we should be fighting for also. And often there's like this caricature of them that they are like just destroyed machines, but it's much more than that. It's about the power structure behind this machinery.
So you kind of hinted towards an optimistic note. We always try to pull out the optimism notes on this podcast. So I wonder what you think about this. So you just highlighted how, you first started writing and you criticized solar, and there's this huge backlash, and now maybe we're starting to see people are a bit more skeptical about the advance of technology, that the smartphone has, become such a ubiquitous presence in our lives, that people are recognizing that they're addicted to these things. And with social media, for example, I mean, how much of the time can you hear someone saying something like, I just feel bad about myself. I go on Twitter and I'm on there for half an hour and I feel bad about myself. It's like there's so much arguing, like you're saying, you have the libertarians and the socialists trying to kill each other and all this kind of stuff. So do you think that maybe the way out of this crisis is through it, in the sense that we just keep going with heavier internet and more technology and more connectivity and more smartphones and more video games and more porn and more negative energy on social media, and eventually we're just kind of going to become sick of it, and we're going to naturally say, like, to kind of back away or something like that? Can you see a ray of hope in that it kind of becomes worse but then it gets better?
Yeah, that's an optimistic view. I think the problem is that, I think my own experience here makes it pretty clear. So I don't have a smartphone. So why? Because of course I am very much connected already when I'm sitting here at my desk. And so I want to keep my sanity, and I want to especially keep my my capacity of reading books, which I notice that everyone else has lost. So from the moment I leave the door, I'm not connected. The problem is that if the rest of the world goes the other direction, it becomes harder and harder. Like when I get to know someone and then I give my phone, I have to say, okay, look, I don't have WhatsApp, I'm not connected. I do have Telegram, but it's on my laptop. So if I talk to you on Telegram, it means that I'm home. If you then send me a message when I'm already on the way to the meeting, don't send a message through Telegram. Then you have to send me an SMS, because otherwise I won't. So it gets really complicated to live as someone without connection in a connected world. And then when I go buy a train ticket in Belgium, I have to pay €7 extra because I don't have a smartphone, because I need to buy it on because it's a peculiar situation, but I travel a lot between Antwerp and Rotterdam if I'm there. And Rotterdam is outside Belgium, so you cannot order it in the machine, the ticket machine. So you have to go to the counter with a human, and then they charge you €7 extra. So with a smartphone, I could solve that. So I pay more. I miss. Not all people are willing to send me an SMS, or they go like, okay, we find some other friends. So you kind of isolate yourself from the rest of the world. And if you're fine with that, well, then okay, but it's definitely not easy. So we would all have to get sick of it at the same time. That would help a lot. I hope so. I solved it. Like, behind my computer screen is a wall of books, and they're all books I want to read. And so because of course I can escape, I'm not connected when I'm outside, and then I observe life, I talk to people, I do so many things that I watch people watching their smartphones. But when I'm inside, I have the same problem as anyone else. I'm writing, and there's constant this kind of urge to check something. Like, and there's always something to check. I mean, especially when you have your website, I can check my book sales, I can check my my traffic, I can see the social media, then what is something on the news, and so on and so on. And then by the time you did the last one, you can start again. So that's why I have this wall of books behind my screen that from the moment I feel this urge comes, I take a book and I start reading. And it gives me so much more than what I find on the screen, but still it's a constant fight, and I'm not immune to it. This and it's of course designed to be addictive, and that is also where kind of a blogosphere, or like with the students here in Barcelona, one group, what they did was they designed an Instagram that is totally the opposite of being addictive. It's as boring as you can imagine it. It was great because it was like black and white pictures. The feed and the news feed ended pretty quickly, and I was like, okay, 2 minutes and you've seen it and you go on with your life. So it's not that that these things are inherently wrong. I think there's also something beautiful in being able to be connected with people who are not necessarily in your neighborhood, or also kind of makes people more open-minded, and you can find people who are interested in the same stuff like you. And the problem is that there are corporations in between that want you to consume and be online longer than is healthy for you. So I think that I'm definitely not against technology, but more about who's deciding how it evolves.
Simon?
Yeah. I had a question about your bike-based projects on the website. I'm wondering if you see like your bike-based projects.
Yeah. Sorry, it's getting dark here, but
no problem. No, do you see potential for any of those to end up as like a household appliance for people that are, say, interested in generating their own energy?
Yeah, that's this whole topic of human power has. I'm someone who cycles a lot. Like I cycle like regularly, quite distances that people are like, "What? Are you crazy?" But I'm like, "Well, it's not that hard. It's not like working in the field all day." And so logically, the idea of building a bike generator to produce energy, kind of, I always wanted to do it. And again, it's an intern who got me there. It's always other people who get me on those paths. And so we built this bike generator, and it actually became part of my solar system here. And the great thing is, like, in itself, to answer your question, powering your household with human power, or modern civilization with human power, which is topic of an art project I'm doing, the Human Power Plant, that's definitely not the solution. I mean, it's great as an artwork, but that's not what we want, and we don't want to go back to slavery on top of that. But what is really interesting in a practical sense about human power is that it is a great backup for an off-grid solar installation. Because like I explained earlier, like when the website or my apartment goes offline, that's always in winter, when it's usually also cold, and I don't have heating, obviously. So then you just go sit on the bike, you add power to the battery because there's not enough sun, and you keep yourself warm. And then if you look to summer, in the summer it's way too hot, especially here, to be on your bike generator. But you also don't need to, because the sun shines enough, so you have all the energy from the solar system. And that means that you actually, by integrating a human-powered backup energy source in your solar system, you can further downsize the battery. Because on the days that it's cloudy, you just sit on this bike for 1-2 hours, and that's enough to have light for the rest of the evening. And so I could also do it with the website, if I see it's going down and I just have a lot of traffic, I could say, like, I connect the bike to the website system, and I just power it myself when I'm home, at least. So in that sense, I think human power is especially great for making people aware of their energy demand, which is the big missing element in the discussion about the energy transition. It's always about energy supply. It's never about energy demand. But if you have to power your own energy use, then of course you have immediately a connection between what you want and what you have to do for it. And that means that you're going to think twice about what you need. So you're not gonna watch a movie by yourself on a flat screen television. You're either gonna watch it on your smartphone or you're gonna invite all the neighbors to do it together and change place on the bike. And that is really what human power is doing. But on the practical side, it really works well with as a backup source, because humans are energy sources, but also like fossil fuels, we're kind of dispatchable. So we're energy storage also at the same time. Because everyone asks me when they see the bike, can you charge a battery? Yes, of course you can, but you are the battery, because you can go sit on the bike whenever you need it. So whenever you need the power.
So I wanted to highlight that you have published now several books. I'm not sure how many. I think I have 2 of your books where you've taken I think I have a couple where it was just basically the articles from the website for a certain set of years and another set of years. But you also now have some topical books. You want to talk a bit about your publishing?
Yeah, so the books are have kind of several there's several reasons why we got books. First, yeah, the website is not always online, so then the books are, of course, compared to the internet, it's hard to beat a book. You can read it whenever you want. You don't need energy, electricity, internet. You can read it in the sun. So it's hard to beat that. And a second reason is to preserve the content of a low-tech magazine in the long term, because, yeah, I'm not always going to be here, and the website one day will also be gone. So in that sense, that's also what a book does very good. And then another reason was actually how to finance the website, because yeah, if nothing of money comes in, I also need to pay the rent. And in the early days before the solar power website, it was partly advertising from like the Google systems, and that's problematic for many reasons already. But when we started designing the solar power website, it became pretty much very quickly clear that it's even impossible it would destroy the whole concept of the website, because Google systems are tracking visitors and are using a lot of energy, so that would not work. So I had to find another way to finance the writing, and I'm very happy that now it is book sales rather than advertising, because then you're basically also part of the problem. So that's now how it works, basically, that the books are financing the website. And so indeed we did 3 chronological volumes since 2007, so it's a lot of big archive. And then 1 book with all the comments, like 3,000 comments. And then late last year we started kind of republishing the whole archive, but then not chronologically but thematically. Because the books, as they are, the chronological books, yeah, it's a series. It's quite a lot. It's quite an investment also, and of course, not everyone who reads Low-Tech magazine is necessarily interested in all the topics. So there's some people, like we have now a lot of people who are interested in sustainable websites, others in transport, and so on. So that's why we now start publishing books that are more about themes that are more affordable, that people can buy, that are only interested in that topic, or people who want to give it to someone as an introduction to Low-Tech magazine. And so, yeah, it works pretty well. And there will be more books.
They're like print on demand or something, or you have a service, you just upload a file of the articles, and then does it, like if I go on today and I order one, does that send a signal to then, okay, print this volume and ship, or is there an inventory, or how does it work?
No, it's print on demand. So one of the problems is in the normal book publishing, what happens is that you have to decide how many books you're going to print. Say we're going to print 3,000 and then you only sell 1,000, and then what you do with these 2,000 others, well, they are being destroyed. So it's not a very sustainable way of making books, and print on demand avoids that. So you only print when someone orders, and that's why it takes a bit longer, because when you order a book, then the printer gets the message that they need to print it, and then they send it to you. Of course, it's not ideal. For example, I don't have a choice to select sustainable paper, like recycled paper. I cannot do that. So it's not the perfect solution, but I think the fact also I could simply not have done this without print on demand. It's like, if I have to print 1,000 copies of every book and then wait, I don't know how many years before they're sold, I'm dead, I cannot survive. So the downside of print on demand is that the cost of a book is very high. So if you want to sell it to bookstores or something, forget it, because for them it's way too expensive. But for now, it's the only way, and I'm pretty happy with it. But it may change in the future. I don't know. And yeah, I think it fits the topic also that there is a physical version of Low Tech magazine. The only problem that, now that we built a sustainable website, such a lightweight website, what about the book? So that's the a question I get on talks, like, you made a sustainable website, but is then the book, how sustainable is that? And that's now a project we're working on to actually also compress the book, not just the website, but to kind of make a way more sustainable version of the book, because I would like to limit the number of trees that get killed in the name of Low Tech magazine.
Yeah, of course. Simon, do you have any more? I have one question I'll say to
No, go for it.
But do you have something?
Oh, I'm good.
Cool.
Answered all my questions.
Yeah. So, well, before we wrap, I just wanted to ask. So, you hinted a little bit there about a project to figure out how to compress the book and make it a bit lighter weight. What other stuff you have coming up? Is there things you want to highlight? Are there new topics that people can look forward to, or what's your next endeavor?
Well, it's 2 years ago, I got, as I said earlier, a new intern, Marie Verde from France. And after the internship, she just stayed. So she's now became my most important collaborator. And she's very much focused on do-it-yourself and manuals. And so you saw her work in the solar manual also. And one of the challenges for me is always, especially in the last years, when so many things in the early days, I published way more articles than I do now, because I only had to write. And I mean, I didn't do anything else. But now, of course, because of the website has become successful, and there's all these side projects, Human Power Plant, the website, and so on, the books, it's getting harder and harder to write. And I would love to go back to a higher rhythm of publishing articles, like what I have been doing for many years. And so the plan is that Marie kind of focuses on the whole do-it-yourself part, and I go back to really writing articles. Because I also noticed that I talked to a lot of young makers lately, and this is a generation that basically grew up with Low Tech magazine. So they were already reading it when they were 15 or something, and they are way further than I am now. I feel that I can trust the whole development of prototypes into the hands of these people that for them, they have internalized the low tech approach, and they're building things that are way better than I do. So the plan is what I hope to promise to the readers is, again, more articles, and at the same time more do-it-yourself projects, but they will be mostly made by others. And then
That's
this
awesome.
combination will be more the new face of low-tech magazine. It's a trend that already was going on, but
so for our listeners, if are there opportunities then to kind of to collaborate or to be an intern, or if someone has a specialty in some topic that overlaps, do you think that there's opportunities to collaborate on things?
yeah, definitely. Like some months ago, we received basically a finished article with images and everything and videos about a motorcycle engineer in the US, Andy, who built this human-powered air compressor for his motorcycle workshop. Yeah, and this is great. I mean, that's I would love to see more of these things, because what Low-Tech Magazine can offer is a platform of people who love to read about your inventions and the stuff you built, and will comment on that, will try to help you improve it. So yeah, this is something that I'm very much open to. That I don't think I should be the only one. I mean, Low-Tech Magazine should take more and more people on board who present their projects. So if you build something that you think really fits the philosophy of the magazine, yeah, feel free to send it over.
Cool. Well,
And the same for writing. It's a bit harder. I find until now I have not found anyone who is a better writer than I am. I found better builders, but not better writers yet. But I hope that will also one day happen. And because of course, if just one guy writing and doing all the rest is a bit difficult to grow the magazine.
Right.
Yeah, I'm totally in the dark, I see. So
that's okay.
It's fitting.
Yeah, the like button is too far away.
Yeah, but your computer is still broadcasting, so that's great.
Yeah, because this one is not on the solar, by the way.
Oh, okay.
It's a computer I only use for video chats.
Okay.
And it has no battery, so it's a bit tricky to run on the solar.
Got it. Cool. Well, this has been super cool. Thank you for taking the time with us today. I love your project. I think it's so cool and it's so important. The philosophy behind it, and I'm always really eager when I see a new article has been posted or emailed out. So yeah. Well, I guess with that we'll wrap up. And thanks again. So lowtechmagazine.com.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, everybody check it out if you haven't. It's really cool. And we'll see you next time.